Hello, and welcome to the Sepsis Innovation webinar. For the next 45 minutes, we will discuss how Opticyte's pioneering technology is transforming sepsis detection and treatment, learn from leading experts about the potential impact of Opticyte's technology in critical care settings and the broader global healthcare market, and hear a candid take from your considerations about investing in Opticyte. I'm Eric Shadisky. I'll be your moderator today. As you see, we have three panelists. All are excited to talk. We're joined by Lori Arakaki, CEO and co-founder of Opticyte. She'll be discussing inventing the VitalO₂ technology, the problems it's solving, what makes this technology not just unique, but transformative for patients and providers. One of those providers is here with us today, Dr. Mohan Mysore, a pediatric emergency department physician who sees the impact and feels the frustration of treating sepsis every day. He'll provide a perspective from the front lines. Also on the call today, thank you to Chris Allison, an investor. He joins us with that investor focus. He understands the current medtech landscape and can discuss the value Opticyte provides from an investor perspective. For those watching, you'll see on your screen, you can enter questions into the Zoom chat. We'll leave time at the end of this conversation to answer a few of those questions. So please add those as we're going through, and we'll have some time at the end to address those. And this recording will be available later. So if you've signed up for this webinar, we'll make sure to send you a recording of this. And of course, for additional information, go to the Opticyte StartEngine page. All right, let's dig in. Let's start with Lori. Lori, this is really your life's work. Why don't you spend just a couple minutes explaining the device and the problem that we're solving?
Great. Thanks, Eric, and thanks to all of our attendees and our panelists. I'm going to just throw up a slide deck presentation here. Just a second. Okay. All righty. Can everybody see the slides up there? Mm-hmm. Yes? Perfect. Yep. Okay, so Opticyte is a medical device startup. We're based in Seattle. I'm a co-founder, the lead inventor of the technology, and the CEO of the company. We're commercializing VitalO₂, a groundbreaking non-invasive medical device that will provide continuous measurements of blood and cell oxygenation. When vital organs are deprived of oxygen, they can't continue to function normally. Without adequate oxygen, organs fail and patients can die. Right now, clinicians don't have the tools to accurately know their patient's oxygenation status. In this sepsis patient, the pulse oximeter read high and normal. The Opticyte device showed low organ oxygenation that improved with IV fluids. Since this was an observational study, the clinicians at that time couldn't see the Opticyte data. One of the critical unmet needs that VitalO₂ will address is the early recognition of sepsis. But just to remind you, again, this is what doctors actually did see. They need Opticyte. In the emergency department, ICU, and operating room, clinicians are left guessing about whether a patient's organs have enough oxygen. Vital signs do not deliver specific information about organ oxygenation. Abnormal blood tests are late indicators of low oxygenation, and they don't provide continuous monitoring. After prescribing treatment, clinicians don't have a definitive read on whether it helped or if the patient needs more. Doctors are looking for tools that allow them to make timely treatment decisions and to optimally titrate treatment in each patient. Dr. Mysore will speak next, and he'll tell you more about the clinical need for VitalO₂.
Sorry about that. Go ahead,
yeah,
Lori.
I've just got a couple more slides and then...
Great.
Yeah. So here's our product. VitalO₂ is a non-invasive monitor that makes measurements from the palm of the hand. We have proprietary and patented technology, and it provides real-time quantitative O2 monitoring, seamlessly integrated with the clinical workflow. The low-cost disposable and a leasing model for the monitors will make VitalO₂ economically feasible for hospitals to adopt it. The underlying technology is a combination of optical spectroscopy and a form of AI known as machine learning. Opticyte measures over 800 wavelengths across the visible and near-infrared ranges, many more than the 2 measured by today's pulse oximeters. We do sophisticated math on the spectra we collect, 2 machine learning algorithms allow us to deliver 2 unprecedented measurements, cell O2 and pulse ox that is racially unbiased. So I'm just going to speak briefly on each of those. And here we go. Cell O2 is an accurate indicator of cellular oxygenation in vital organs. Here's a quote by Dr. Kessler. He's an attending physician here at the University of Washington about how knowing cell O2 will help. He said, "In critically ill patients, we currently rely on indirect measures to evaluate tissue perfusion. Cell O2 is ideal because it's a direct measure of cellular perfusion, and our goal is to maintain this perfusion in our patients to avoid organ failure."
Mhm.
Cell O2 will help at triage in the emergency department, allowing early diagnosis and treatment. And continuous cell O2 monitoring will lead to optimal treatment decisions tailored to each patient. Today's pulse oximeters are inaccurate in people with darker skin. Remember how early in the pandemic, Black people died of COVID twice as often as white people? It turns out that Black patients were misdiagnosed with normal pulse ox levels when they were actually sick. Hospital admission and treatment were delayed and people died. Publications have been coming out that inaccurate pulse ox readings have terrible consequences for Black patients and people of all races. Opticyte is solving the problem with today's inaccurate pulse oximeters.
There we go. Thank you very much, Lori. I think you spoke to that really well in terms of the problem that we're seeing and the solution that you're offering. This is something, Dr. Mysore, is just a quick clarification, a pediatric interventionist. So tell me a little bit about what you see on the front lines as someone who treats patients who may have sepsis. But I think the big point there is they may. Seems like there's a blind spot that physicians are very well aware of that maybe patients aren't in terms of detecting and identifying sepsis.
So I'm a pediatric intensivist, and I work primarily in the pediatric ICU, but many times we're called to the emergency room as well to take care of a child who presents with very early sepsis. And the problem with our current monitoring devices, and that includes blood pressure, heart rate, and pulse oximetry, is that they are not really accurate in terms of what's happening at the cellular level, at the tissue level. And that's where the cell O2 comes in, because it is a truly innovative and very unique product that's out there that provides us with continuous monitoring of the patient's cellular oxygen levels. So this is really important because many times we're actually groping in the dark, trying to figure out whether this patient truly is in shock or doesn't have adequate perfusion to the tissues. And one of the markers we use, lactate from a blood gas, for example, is, and not to get too wonky here, but the lactate levels are a point in time. They need to be drawn from an arterial line, which is invasive, and it gives you only what's happening at that particular point in time. It's not a continuous monitor. Whereas the VitalO₂ gives us continuous monitoring. The cell O2 gives us continuous monitoring.
To dig in there just a little bit more, this is a timing equation, right? You don't have the information you need at the time you need it to form the decision you need to best serve the patient currently with the standard of care that you see. Is that right?
Yes, and I'm very glad that Lori showed that one slide where the pulse oximeter, which is a current continuous monitoring device that we all employ in emergency rooms and the hospitals, it it's sitting right there, 95 to 100%. But if you look at what's happening at the cellular level, at the tissue level, during that golden hour, where time is very critical and minutes are ticking, and that's when we can truly impact the patient's outcome and conserve or preserve organ perfusion. You can see that the cell O2 was really low. The patient got some fluid and the cell O2 came up nicely and then again started drifting down as perfusion was somewhat compromised. It continued to be compromised, and then a repeat fluid bolus again got the patient's perfusion up and the cell O2 levels up closer to where we'd like them to be. So it is very impactful because time is of essence, and we have a very short period or time frame where we are resuscitating patients actively, either due to trauma, sepsis, hemorrhage. In all those circumstances, this becomes really important.
Thank you very much.
Can you still hear me?
You disappeared just a little bit on us, but we can still hear your voice.
Yeah.
You mentioned something. I'm going to wait for you to remanifest here as I talk. But you talked about groping in the dark, so your disappearing is really on point. And here we go again. All right, but it seems like you have the tools to affect the change you need to affect in patient care, but you don't have the visibility to utilize those tools when you need to use them. And if you have disappeared completely, we can move on to Lori. Are you still there, Dr.?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I'm still here. The image seems to have, I don't know what happened to the camera. It's on Fred's. So I apologize for that. But yes, we definitely need better tools to guide us in our management. And also, one of the very important parts of what we do when we manage patients is we'll institute a therapy and then we reassess. And this is happening continuously in the emergency room or in the ICU. We will prioritize treatment options, and we institute them and we reassess to look at what is the effect on the patient. And having a non-invasive tool such as a cell O2 to provide us with that continuous readout of what's happening at the cellular level is going to be, it's so crucial. I cannot overemphasize the importance of that kind of technology that to date we don't have in our clinical arena.
That's great.
Yeah, those are really good points. In an analogy that I would look at it is, okay, if I'm buying or selling a stock, do I want to know where the price is trading in the moment, or do I want to know 30 minutes from now? I'd really prefer to have a real-time number.
Well, you want to go where the puck is going.
Mohan, I want to ask you a question. So, especially in the ICU, to what you were speaking about, when you deliver treatment, whether it's IV fluids or vasopressors, anything that you guys, you have a full medical toolbox there to deliver treatment. My question, though, is once you deliver the treatment, currently, how do you know, or how do you not know whether it worked? How long does it take for you to know, and assess before you up the dose or do it again? Because, that's in contrast to what cell O2 can do in real time.
So, Lori, thanks for the question. We use the tools that are available to us currently. That is, we look at the heart rate, we look at the blood pressure, and the blood pressure is, I'll get back to the blood pressure in a minute, but I'll just delineate I'll list them first. So heart rate, blood pressure, perfusion, organ function, such as the patient's mental status or urine output, which tells us about end organ perfusion of the kidneys. So those are the things we look at. If we have an arterial line, we have a continuous readout of the blood pressure, but we may draw blood gas looking at lactates, lactate levels, acidosis. That tells us about what's happening in terms of the tissue being starved for oxygen and producing more lactic acid. However, a patient who comes in early shock, their blood pressure may be entirely normal. And the blood pressure, especially in children, we find that they clamp down peripherally and the blood pressure is the last thing to go. So the blood pressure is following along and then it drops off the cliff as the shock gets worse. So it's a early compensatory mechanism, but we can't rely on, you can be in shock with the normal blood pressure is something that that's drilled into us from day one of our fellowship in critical care. You can have a normal blood pressure and still be in shock. So having the cell O2 device giving us a readout in real time continuously of what's happening at the cellular level is vital. It's a huge advance in our ability to assess cellular oxygen.
I think that's great. Thank you, Dr. Mysore. Lori, why don't you tell us a little bit about the business case, the business model, and I think that'll help lead us into Chris, who made a very important point about real-time measurements, not just in the healthcare setting, but also in the financial setting. So we'll get to that. But Lori, why don't you show us who's on the team?
Yeah, so we have a small but effective team. I have a very accomplished set of board members and also a clinical advisory board. And these advisors guide the company towards success. VitalO₂ has a very large market. We estimate it to be $3 billion annually in the US, selling into emergency departments, ICUs, and ORs. The VitalO₂ disposable is going to be very inexpensive to manufacture. That is going to result in a high profit margin for Opticyte. Hospitals are actually used to paying similar prices, like $20 right now, for pulse ox disposables today. So that shouldn't be a big barrier to sales. To make VitalO₂ financially workable for hospitals, Opticyte will lease the monitors to them instead of requiring them to make large capital equipment purchases. The profits from the disposables will pay for the monitors. So I'll just tell you a little story right now. I had a conversation with the CEO of the Temple Health Care System, hospital system in Philadelphia. They have a lot of patients that could really benefit from the VitalO₂. And that CEO told me, I hate to tell you, Lori, but you know what? Even if using your device is the right thing to do for our patients, our hospital can't use it and adopt it if you're going to charge us, several $1,000s for each of the devices that we have to have at each bedside. It's not possible for us to do it. And so even if it's the right thing to do, we can't do it. So we need to make our product financially, economically feasible for hospitals to use it. Okay, so hospitals, we believe, will be glad to pay $20 for each disposable in exchange for saving thousands of dollars in hospital costs when there are fewer ICU days and also accurate hospital admissions and discharges. About 20% of sepsis survivors get readmitted to the hospital within 30 days of discharge. This is a huge hospital cost that they would love to bring down. Okay, so I have some great news for you. Just last week, the FDA awarded us the Breakthrough Device Designation for our pulse ox technology that will be accurate in people with dark skin. This is a huge win for us. We already have the breakthrough device designation for SelO₂. So now we have that designation for both of the measurements. And having the breakthrough device designation will fast track market clearance at the FDA. So we anticipate entering the hospital market in 2 years with a superior pulse ox product that hospitals need and can afford. Adding a new measurement to the hospital like SelO₂ can be perceived to take a long time, and we're addressing this by using a Trojan horse strategy. SelO₂ will ride along inside the VitalO₂ because the same sensor and disposable will be used to make both measurements. So at the beginning, physicians will just start looking at SelO₂ to see what it does. But on a really definite basis, Opticyte and early adopter physicians will do studies and publish papers demonstrating the benefits of SelO₂ in sepsis, trauma, respiratory failure, and cardiac failure. Okay, that's it for now.
Great.
Lori, thank you for bringing up the pulse oximeter aspect, because that's really important. And congratulations on getting the FDA designation.
Thank you.
And that's great news. We didn't talk much about the pulse oximeter part, or I did not, but that's truly an important aspect as well, because different skin tones were never tested when the pulse oximeter technology was first came to being 20 plus years ago, 30 plus years ago. And so now I'm dating myself, because I think it was probably just around the time of my residency. So, but now, and they found that differing skin tones will have differing numbers on the current pulse oximeters. And I think our Opticyte's product has a much more robust and accurate numerical algorithm and calculation for the pulse oximeter readout across various skin tones. And as we see that globally, 84% of the population globally are people of color, this becomes more and more important for us to recognize that the current technology just doesn't cut it in people of color.
That's such an important point, and you hit on a really specific number, and I want to just dive into those numbers a little bit before we go to Chris, because Chris we're on an earlier call, he had this thesis about doing good and doing well, do good and do well. But sepsis affects, nearly 50 million people worldwide and causes more than 10 million deaths annually. And in the US alone, we're going to have 350,000 deaths because of this. 2 million people may suffer sepsis in this coming year. The scope of the problem is just absolutely enormous. And I think I really appreciated your thesis as an investor. So if you can kind of dive in with that perspective, I think we'd appreciate that.
Sure. I will say I've definitely done more due diligence on Opticyte and the technology and the opportunity than any other investment I've ever made. So just quickly, I'll say, when this came across my desk, Lori and I both live in Seattle, and I asked my uncle, who is a cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, I said, "This is new to me. What do you think?" He said, "Wow, this is actually quite compelling. I don't usually see things that could move the needle like this." So I invested early and then continued to do research on the 10Ks of the older tissue oximeters. There was a company called Somanetics that sold to Covidien for $300 million in 2010. And they sort of laid out their strategy, which was leasing the monitors to the hospitals because they're capital constrained. I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." Then I found out that Covidien then sold to Medtronic for $54 billion in 2014. And then a more recent data point was that HasMed, which was kind of a Me Too tissue oximeter, sold to Edwards in 2019 for $100 million. And then most recently, Edwards just sold less than a year ago their critical care unit to Becton Dickinson for $4.3 billion. So, from a dollars and cents standpoint, money is coming into this. They recognize how much the United States is spending on sepsis, over $57 billion. They revealed in the sale of the Becton Dickinson to Becton Dickinson that their gross margins are 65%. And what a lot of these companies are looking for when they acquire something is to grow their gross margins, not compress them and go down the value chain. So with potential of almost about a 40% higher gross margin, that's really attractive. And then from my research, the compound annual growth rate should be in the high single digits to low double digits. So that there is recurring revenue in the sense of the razor is the monitor and the fiber optic cable, but the razor blade is the actual sensor that, due to sanitary purposes, you have to replace. And so it's not just a one-time sale of a capital good and then you're kind of done, and you may have to service it every so years down the road. So but then as things kept emerging, and this is sort of what I loved about being involved, at least on the science side, and I'm not a doctor, but is then during COVID, we did see this even more important aspect of melanin in absorbing light, and why that would create false positives for oxygenation. And so, I ran that by a friend who is a pediatrician, and she is Black, and so about 4 on the 5 of the Fitzpatrick scale, 1 to 5. She's about a 4. And she was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so just being able to do well while doing good made me feel even more confident. So I have invested in the StartEngine campaign as well. So I'm happy to talk more about other due diligence I've done, other doctors I've spoken with.
But also something that I think is really important and also personal is you've been impacted by sepsis yourself. And I think it's important for people to realize, I know Dr. Mysore did an excellent job of kind of laying it out, but there's completely unforeseen and unpredictable circumstances that cannot be accounted for that your family endured because of sepsis.
Yes, I lost actually 2 loved ones to sepsis. Most recently was my aunt, who had joined my mother on a trip in Idaho. And as soon as she got there, she wasn't feeling well. And, as I understand it, it can be very hard to understand what sepsis is. Is someone just tired? Especially the beginning phases, are they dehydrated? And then you have some water. But my mom said, look, you're not walking very well, and let's take you to the hospital. And the hospital admitted her, and it's not in a major city. And they monitored her, did a little bit of intervention, but then decided to put her in a sort of a medical van, I guess, and take her about 3 hours away to Boise, which is the largest city. And she passed away in the van. It was late at night, and it can be a silent killer. And so I do wonder if the VitalO₂, if it had been available, would they have said, we're either going to chopper you, we're going to intervene more here. And yes, it is kind of a what if, and I just don't want that to happen to other families.
Yeah, that's very true. And sorry for your loss. Dr. Mysore, tell us about that adoption piece. There's a new measurement. How could it be adopted by MDs, and what would they need to make that an impactful piece of equipment and technology? So people like Chris and his family won't have to endure this in the future.
Yeah, sure. Chris, again, sorry that you and your family um, had to lose a family member because we did not have good tools to have a more accurate and quick idea of where your aunt was along the spectrum of the disease, and sepsis being a very broad category, but you can go from sepsis to septic shock to organ dysfunction and then death, and that's the typical progression of sepsis unless it is recognized and management is instituted and management is continued with frequent reassessments and additional interventions such as we start with fluids and we may institute some vasoactive medications to help the heart beat a little more efficiently, to support the blood pressure and improve perfusion to the tissues, all of which are of a whole, which is getting oxygen and other nutrients to the tissues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where VitalO₂ monitoring as a continuous non-invasive monitor could dramatically change the outcome.
What would doctors need to see to adopt that technology?
And I think doctors would, we have become very accustomed to using a pulse oximeter probe, and the VitalO₂ probe, which gives us two measurements. One is a cell O2 measurement and also a more accurate pulse oximeter SpO2 measurement. Those would be kind of second nature to nurses and physicians because we are so used to slapping a pulse oximeter probe on the moment a patient comes into the emergency room. Actually, if they are coming by ambulance, they already have that probe placed on the patient, just like it's become part of the vital signs, just like a heart rate and blood pressure and respiratory status. Pulse oximeter is so the acceptance, and someone asked a question about learning curve. I think those should be, and I'm speculating here because I haven't personally used the device or seen it in action, but seeing the videos and talking to Lori about this, the acceptance should be very, very rapid and second nature to most clinicians throughout. I just got back from West Africa where I'd gone to teach a course, and even in the small community, they had access to the pulse oximeters. So it's universally available and accepted as an important vital sign, if you will.
That's fantastic. Lori, back over to you. Tell us what's next for Opticyte as you walk down this path, and what funding will help you accomplish.
Yeah, thanks. So we're raising money here in the StartEngine campaign. The next thing that we're going to do with the funding is to do our pivotal clinical study for SelO2 in sepsis patients. We have this study protocol all set to go. This will happen in Minneapolis. We have a very strong set of clinical collaborators there who will help us do our study. It's really important to have that because the data that will come out of that study is going to prove the value, the predictive value of SelO2 in sepsis. So we're going to correlate the initial SelO2 values that are measured on patients that are suspected to have sepsis with their actual clinical outcome and sepsis diagnosis. In addition to that, a big step we need to accomplish is to do design for manufacturing. We need to get the manufacturable product ready so that we can go ahead and get FDA clearance on that and start selling the device. So all of these are our two next really big things that we're raising money for.
Mm-hmm. And Lori showed a slide earlier, Chris, about the board and her lean team. Tell us a little bit about the capital efficiency that you've seen as an investor with Opticyte.
That's a good question. That was one of the first things I looked at, and actually went to the lab to see the prototype and what they were working on, because you always want to see, well, where can startups burn a lot of money? That's signing an expensive lease at a Class A office or biotech facility. This was not it. This is the money. So I was confident it wasn't going to salaries or too expensive of space, and that I was going to improve the device, do research, and get it out, helping people into the market quickly. So, and all the years that I've been involved, I haven't seen any waste. Everybody mostly works from home, and so you can be confident. I certainly have been confident, and the dollars going in are going to get it to market.
Yeah, I just want to say that we employ some very experienced and valuable consultants for the company. So, and we found this method of using consultants to get a lot of work done to be extremely capital efficient, because I can, pay them that way. Instead of the other model is bring employees in-house, which we haven't done. So key people that do fantastic work for us. We have a senior data scientist. The company's name is Eigenvector Research. Dr. Palacios and I work very closely together to develop the machine learning algorithms, the StartEngine that we already have, and our PulseOx one that we are working on right now. We also have a very talented regulatory consultant. She has already worked at the FDA, so she knows how to help, interact with them and do the submissions. And then, of course, we use outside engineering. Starfish Medical has done much of all of the initial concept and design. So that way we can really make progress very efficiently. And that's good for investors, because the less dilutive funding that I need to raise into the company, the better it is for investors that come in. You don't get diluted as much yourself. Opticyte has been very good at getting non-dilutive funding. So far, up to date, we've received $4.05 million in grant funding from NIH, and we have another grant proposal in right now that is set to be reviewed later this month.
That's fantastic. We're starting to get some questions that are coming in, so I'd encourage those watching to put some more questions in the Q&A if those come to mind. There has to be other use cases beyond the ICU, Lori, or if you thought about what that might look like, and this is a question that has come in, other applications in the hospital, potentially maternity.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big places that we look forward to being is at triage in the emergency department. What I hear from our colleagues there in emergency medicine is that right now it's very difficult to know, with the screening tools they have, which are basically vital signs, to know whether somebody is really sick. Should they be admitted? Should they get sent home? Typically, blood draws are not done at triage. So even though that there's information there for physicians, that doesn't normally happen at triage. So we really feel like we can be super valuable to definitively tell the triage folks, this person needs to get admitted or not. We also have a play in anesthesiology. We have run a study at Swedish Cherry Hill in cardiac surgery patients that undergo bypass. And the anesthesiologists are very interested in knowing that during the surgical procedure, their patients are fully perfused. I mean, that is their job during the surgery to know. We have some interesting data from that study that shows that in one case, there was a very inadvertent drop in cell O2 by giving, a drug that was supposed to support perfusion, but instead it did the opposite by clamping down on the microcirculation. So, yeah, that's why in the emergency room and the ICU and the operating room are the three places we're going to sell into the hospital first, even though, sure, VitalO₂ would be helpful in all hospital beds, but we're going to go for the critically ill places first.
All right, Chris, you have a perspective on what might also be exciting for the applications of this technology. Thoughts there?
Well, yeah. So as a non-MD, I went immediately to combat casualty care in the Department of Defense. That's not exactly in hospitals per se, but so I thought, oh, well, this would be great, the golden hour of combat casualty care, and where I think gunshot wounds and trauma use 10 times as much blood as other trauma, and each unit of blood costs about $500 just in a hospital setting, but everybody has a different blood type, and so I've heard of or I've read about firefights out, special forces, which are very high value people, essentially, going through all the training, and where they would have a firefight and then they ran out of blood to transfuse, so they were pulling blood from each other who had the same blood type out in the field, giving it to one another. So there's IEDs and compartment syndrome, which is when you lose part of your limb, your vascular system, and say your thigh or quadricep is built to supply blood to the rest of your leg, but so the blood could pool there, which can lead to necrosis. And let's see, what else was, in OBGYN, I know an OB at the Nashville Vanderbilt Medical Center, and I told him about Opticyte. It's actually a really good friend, brother-in-law, and he said, and this is farther out, so I don't want to make any promises or what have you. I don't even fully understand the science, but he said if you could measure the fetal oxygen levels in utero, that would be a game changer, because right now what they do, or as he explained to me, is if you want to see how a baby is progressing, the baby's oxygen doesn't correspond to the mother's. And so pulse ox on the mother won't pick up the oxygenation of the baby. So they do an invasive fetal scalp electrode to measure the electrodes in the baby's brainwaves, which is definitely invasive. And so he said, gosh, if you could manually apply that, later this decade, he said that would be incredible, because then we would know how is the baby in trouble, and by how much, and what do we need to do? Do we need to do an immediate C-section? Again, it's like, I want to know right now. I don't want to know 15 minutes later. I don't.
And that's our society too, right? We need to know now. We need to know everything now. We're coming up on our time. Dr. Mysore, do you have a closing thought? And then we'll go to Lori, and then we'll close our webinar.
Thank you for attending. And Lori covered most of the use case scenarios. And Chris, thanks for bringing some of the trauma. There's civilian trauma as well, motor vehicle accidents, multi-trauma, and this would be life-saving, potentially life-saving in many of those cases. So thank you all, and look forward to your continued interest and funding of Opticyte. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Mysore.
Yeah, and Lori, why don't you wrap us up?
Sure. So I really want to thank Mohan and Chris for sharing your perspectives on why it's so important to get VitalO₂ into hospitals and also why Opticyte is a sound investment. To our webinar attendees, thank you for your time to hear about Opticyte. I'd love for you to consider investing in our StartEngine campaign today. In doing so, you'll help us move forward and cross the finish line. Really, investments of $2,500 or more will really help us. And please join us on our journey. We will bring you good value as investors.
Fantastic. Lori, thank you. Chris, much appreciated. Dr.
Thank you,
Mysore,
Eric.
thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Please explore Opticyte through the StartEngine page. You can just Google StartEngine Opticyte and it'll pop right up for you. All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.